actually technological progress and one of your arguments in the book is a sort of playful dialogue of old and new, constantly changing. The printing press was based on the wine press, centuries and millennia old technology. But let's go back to what Mark was saying, because that's a very good introduction, isn't it? Because that's kind of the point you make at the beginning of your book. And it might be slightly of a book that we've enjoyed, The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and
it's a lovely book, and that was very much in the back of my mind, actually. And some of the research they draw on is some of the research I draw on. And one of the things I loved about work like that, and sort of the new waves of anthropology and archaeology that have come through in the last 20 years, it is the way that you really get away from this idea that civilization was just kind of waiting to happen in a sort of nascent egg-like form, that at certain points there was going to be printing, and then there was going to be industrialization, and sooner or later the computer was always going to happen and look exactly like it does now. And they put a huge emphasis on the kind of richness and multiplicity of prehistoric and Paleolithic cultures, and the huge, mysterious collective achievements of humanity 10, 11, 12,000 years ago and more, carving, coming together, creating these vast gathering places and examples of art and bones and symbolic works, which are deeply mysterious. But they speak to me of the sort of contingency of history. And as Mark said, there's a lovely quote from the economist W. Bryant Arthur, who says a new technology must be conceived mentally before it is physically. And this for me is almost the defining human trait, our ability to remake the world in the light of our inner lives. But of course, our inner lives are these rich, strange, communal things. I write a lot about children in the book, the childhood of our species, our literal children. And Mark was reminding me of the fact that the Incan civilization, I believe the Incan civilization, invented the wheel, but only for children's toys. Now, of course, South America is very hilly, but they had quite sophisticated wheels, but only as things that children played with. They didn't think to apply these or wish to apply these or choose to apply these to transport or indeed and their measuring of time using water was incredible. Their stoneworking was incredible, but it didn't look anything like it does now. And this fascinates me, because I think once we get trapped in the kind of delusion of inevitabilism, then we take people out of the picture just when we need to be front and center, when we need to be imagining, a whole range of possible futures and then debating which ones we wish to bring about and live in and which ones are worth living in and why.
You also take aim, Tom, at the idea that we're locked in a kind of inevitable competition with each other. So life is nasty, brutish and short. You said that, you call it Darwinian, it's probably a misunderstanding of Darwin. And in fact, as the anarchists would say, as David Graeber would have argued when he was alive, the sort of cooperative element is really left out of a lot of kind of mainstream thought. When you see the biographies of the American CEOs and so on, they're called things like Winning and Conquering, and they talk about nature, the natural rise to the top of the kind of wolves, and the weaker people are sort of left at the bottom. And that misses out this enormous factor of cooperation between people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very bad idea to go to sociopaths for your life lessons. That's just it's not a good plan. And people like the primatologist Sarah Bleffer Hardy have made this point in their research. And actually, among modern philosophers, I particularly looked at Alison Gopnik, who's written so much about children and childhood. And she makes just a very simple but very, very powerful point, which is that if you look at humanity and what makes us remarkable and able to be a species that possesses language and culture and technology, childhood is at the heart of this, because the young human, unlike any other creature on Earth, has these years and years and years of incredible vulnerability and neuroplasticity. The smartest thing on the planet is a 6-month-old. My children learn more in a year than I could hope to learn in the rest of my life, quite possibly. But what comes with this is the very simple fact that our children are born incredibly vulnerable compared to any other species. The evolutionary strategy, bar none, that gets us through, that we have immemorially relied upon, is one of kind of hyper cooperation, hyper empathy, the custodianship of culture, of the young, of language. We have to be, as I put, we're born into prehistory and have to be taught a way out. We are teachers and learners. The future is quite literally children. I mean, obviously, self-evidently, but everything we do and are, we have to teach again and again. And people just ignore this idiotically. And, you know, there is appalling violence and suffering in our world. We all know that. But I think what we too easily overlook is, in a way, just how much our default state is one often of compassion and empathy and love in all its multiplicity. This is very untrendy stuff to say at tech conferences, you know, to talk about eros and agape, to talk about xenia, to talk about these kind of wonderfully rich Greek descriptions of the multiple dimensions of human passion and love. But this is the stuff that drives us. And so I talk about my children a lot, rather shamelessly, really, because it can often shock the tech bros and others into realizing that actually, A, there's obviously stuff they care about more than making money, unless they're like real, proper Swiftian, let's eat the children sociopaths. But B, this is true of everybody all the time.
Yeah.
It's so horribly obvious. I mean, my little talk this morning, I just said, you know, my children come home from school and they show me the things they've drawn and written. And I don't look at my daughter's, my 8-year-old daughter's drawings and say, oh my goodness, this is rubbish. You're wasting your time. You should be using AI. I mean, of course I don't say that, because the point of my children drawing and playing and writing and reading is not to try and produce shiny, perfect, beautiful outputs. It's to learn to use language, to discover who they are, to find their place in the world, to gain fluency and belonging and membership in a living culture. And actually, for much of what we do and value, it's being a part of the making and the thinking and the trying and the debating that matters. And we have to be really rigorous, I think, at dividing those things we wish and need to be a part of that are intrinsically part of the business of being and becoming human, and those things that we absolutely may wish to automate and outsource, the labor, the tasks that are demeaning or dangerous or dull. But the idea that everything is just this maximization loop it's deeply philosophically and empirically illiterate. This is the weird thing. I'm getting excited here, but just people stand up all the time and say things that are so obviously wrong and stupid that you wonder how they get away with it.